A unique moment in the history of this country was the attainment of freedom and the creation of an independent India. It was a time when people from every part of the country and every walk of life were prepared to give up their best. It was a time when some of the finest poems and novels were written, the most inspiring speeches were delivered, a time for bravery and cooperation, for selfless service and fearlessness. In this recording, you will hear the voices of a few of these men and women whose ideas and actions helped India win her freedom. Midnight, August 14, 1947. On the Declaration of Independence, India's first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru delivered this speech.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. It is fitting that at this solemn moment we take the pledge of dedication to the service of India and her people, and to the still larger cause of humanity. At the dawn of history, India started on her unending quest, and trackless centuries are filled with her striving and the grandeur of her successes and her failures. Through good and ill fortune alike, she has never lost sight of that quest or forgotten the ideals which gave her strength. We end today a period of ill fortune, and India discovers herself again. The achievement we celebrate today is but a step, an opening of opportunity to the greater triumphs and achievements that await us. Are we brave enough and wise enough to grasp this opportunity and accept the challenge of the future? Freedom and power bring responsibility. That responsibility rests upon this assembly, a sovereign body representing the sovereign people of India. Before the birth of freedom, we have endured all the pains of labor, and our hearts are heavy with the memory of this sorrow. Some of those pains continue even now. Nevertheless, the past is over, and it is the future that beckons to us now. That future is not one of ease or resting, but of incessant striving, so that we might fulfill the pledges we have so often taken and the one we shall take today. The service of India means the service of the millions who suffer. It means the ending of poverty and ignorance and disease and inequality of opportunity. The ambition of the greatest man of our generation has been to wipe every tear from every eye. That may be beyond us, but so long as there are tears and suffering, so long our work will not be over. And so we have to labor and to work hard to give reality to our dreams. Those dreams are for India, but they are also for the world, for all the nations and peoples are too closely knit together today for any one of them to imagine that it can live apart. Peace has been said to be indivisible, so is freedom, so is prosperity now. And so also is disaster in this one world that can no longer be split into isolated fragments. To the people of India, whose representatives we are, we make appeal to join us with faith and confidence in this great adventure. This is no time for petty and destructive criticism, no time for ill will or blaming others. We have to build the noble mansion of free India where all her children may dwell.
On August 15, 1948, Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru addressed the nation.
Fellow countrymen, comrades and friends, a year ago on this very day and at this very hour, I broadcasted to you from this place. Free India is 1 year old today, but what trials and tribulations she has passed through during this infancy of her freedom. She has survived in spite of all the peril and disaster that might well have overwhelmed a more mature and well-established nation. We have reason to be thankful for this achievement and for the many other achievements that stand to the credit of our people. Let us not belittle our record or forget the courage, the hard work and the sacrifice with which our people have faced and overcome many of these perils during this fateful year. But let us also not forget where we have failed or where we have erred, for our failures and errors have been many. Some of these are obvious enough, but the real failure has been a failure of the spirit and a falling away from the high standards set by the father of our nation, under whose wise guidance we had struggled and marched for over a quarter of a century. He had taught us that worthy ends can only be achieved through worthy means, that ideals and objectives can never be divorced from the methods adopted to realize them. He had told us to cast out fear, for fear is not only ignoble, but is also the parent of hatred and violence. Many of us forgot this lesson and fear gripped us. Fear not of some distant adversary, but fear of each other, and evil deeds followed in its train. The Master who guided us and inspired us is no more. We have to shoulder the burden ourselves, and now the first question that you have to put to ourselves is this: do we stand by his teaching and message, or do we stray into new paths? All of us talk of India, and all of us demand many things from India. What do we give to her in return? We can take nothing from her beyond what we give her. India will ultimately give us what we give her of love and service and productive and creative work. India will be what we are. Our thoughts and action will shape her. Born of her fruitful womb, we are children of hers, little bits of the India of today, and yet we are also the parents of the India of tomorrow. If we are big, so will India be, and if we grow little-minded and narrow in outlook, so also will India be. Our troubles during the past year were largely the result of this narrowness in outlook and pettiness in action, which is so foreign to India's great cultural inheritance. Communalism threatened to crush the free spirit in us. Provincialism came in the way of that larger unity which is so essential to India's greatness and progress. The spirit of faction spread and made us forget the big things that we had stood for. We have to find ourselves again and go back to the free India of our dreams. We have to rediscover the old values and place them in the new setting of a free India. For freedom brings responsibility and can only be sustained by self-discipline, hard work, and the spirit of a free people. So, let us be rid of everything that limits us and degrades us. Let us cast out fear and communalism and provincialism. Let us build up a free and democratic India where the interest of the masses of our people has always the first place, to which all other interests must submit. Freedom has no meaning unless it brings relief to these masses from their many burdens. Democracy means tolerance, tolerance not merely of those who agree with us, but of those who do not agree with us. With the coming of freedom, our patterns of behavior must change also, so as to fit in with this freedom. To the youth of the country, I would make a special appeal, for they are the leaders of tomorrow, and on them will be cast the burden of upholding India's honor and freedom. My generation is a passing one, and soon we shall hand over the bright torch of India, which embodies her great and eternal spirit, to younger hands and stronger arms. May they hold it aloft, undimmed and untarnished, so that its light reaches every home.
Rabindranath Tagore, the poet laureate of India, reads his own poem, which describes his vision of an independent country, a country which is free of poverty and superstition, a country where each person can grow, study, and develop, a country which is truly united.
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
Rabindranath Tagore's song Jana Gana Mana was adopted by the Constituent Assembly as the national anthem of India on January 24, 1950.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल जमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तब जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे.
A speech delivered by Subhash Chandra Bose in which he describes what Indian students should do for their country. He asks young people to dedicate themselves to fight for true freedom.
I appeal to you to be ready to pay the price of freedom, which is service and suffering. Friends, I would beg of you to remember the part which youths and particularly students have played in the freedom movement in other countries in Europe as well as in Asia. Are you not going to emulate what youths and students have done in Russia, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in China, and other countries under the sun? I am sure you will live up to their example and even improve upon it. I would also beg of you to remember what Mother India expects of you. In addressing this appeal to you, I feel emboldened at the part which you have already played in the national struggle during the last few decades. There is no doubt that we have advanced a long way towards our goal of Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. I have just told you that freedom is a priceless treasure, and we can hope to win freedom for ourselves only when we have paid the price. That price, as I have just told you, is service and suffering. I therefore appeal to you to be ready, to be prepared for the utmost service and for the maximum sacrifice in the cause of India's emancipation. I am sure you will rise to the occasion when the call comes. I am sure you'll be prepared to do everything possible to give up even life itself should the need and the occasion arise, so that India may be free. Friends, those of you who are poor and obscure, I should like to see your poverty and obscurity devoted to the service of your motherland. Work that she might prosper, suffer that she might rejoice.
Gandhiji speaks about his beliefs. He believed that God exists everywhere and in every person. Hence, he led a life of non-violence and loved all human beings, despite their caste or religion.
There is an indefinable, mysterious power that pervades everything. I feel it, though I do not see it. It is this unseen power which makes itself felt and yet defies all proof, because it is so unlike all that I perceive through my senses. It transcends the senses, but it is possible to reason out the existence of God to a limited extent. Even in ordinary affairs, we know that people do not know who rules or why and how he rules, and yet they know that there is a power that certainly rules. In my tour last year in Mysore, I met many poor villagers, and I found upon inquiry that they did not know who ruled Mysore. They simply said, some god ruled it. If the knowledge of these poor people was so limited about their ruler, I, who am infinitely lesser in respect to God than they to their ruler, need not be surprised if I do not realize the presence of God, the King of Kings. Nevertheless, I do feel, as the poor villagers felt about Mysore, that there is orderliness in the universe. There is an unalterable law governing everything and every being that exists or lives. It is not a blind law, for no blind law can govern the conduct of living beings. And thanks to the marvelous researches of Sir J.C. Bose, it can now be proved that even matter is life. That law, then, which governs all life is God. Law and the lawgiver are one. I may not deny the law or the lawgiver because I know so little about it or him. Just as my denial or ignorance of the existence of an earthly power will avail me nothing, even so my denial of God and his law will not liberate me from its operation, whereas humble and mute acceptance of divine authority makes life's journey easier, even as the acceptance of earthly rule makes life under it easier. I do dimly perceive that whilst everything around me is ever changing, ever dying, there is underlying all that change a living power that is changeless, that holds all together, that creates, dissolves, and recreates. That informing power or spirit is God, and since nothing else that I see merely through the senses can or will persist, he alone is. And is this power benevolent or malevolent? I see it as purely benevolent, for I can see that in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists. In the midst of darkness, light persists. Hence I gather that God is life, truth, light. He is love. He is the supreme good. But he is no God who merely satisfies the intellect, if he ever does. God, to be God, must rule the heart and transform it. He must express himself in every smallest act of his votary. This can only be done through a definite realization, more real than the five senses can ever produce. Sense perceptions can be and often are false and deceptive, however real they may appear to us. Where there is realization outside the senses, it is infallible. It is proved not by extraneous evidence, but in the transformed conduct and character of those who have felt the real presence of God within. Such testimony is to be found in the experiences of an unbroken line of prophets and sages in all countries and climes. To reject this evidence is to deny oneself. This realization is preceded by an immovable faith. He who would, in his own person, test the fact of God's presence can do so by a living faith. And since faith itself cannot be proved by extraneous evidence, the safest course is to believe in the moral government of the world, and therefore in the supremacy of the moral law, the law of truth and love. Exercise of faith will be the safest where there is a clear determination, summarily, to reject all that is contrary to truth and love. I confess that I have no argument to convince through reason. Faith transcends reason. All as I can advise is not to attempt the impossible.
Sarojini Naidu, a poetess, freedom fighter. On the death of Mahatma Gandhi, she gave a moving speech in which she reminds us of the need to follow Gandhiji's example. Honesty, truth, fearlessness, and ahimsa should be the guiding principles of our lives.
I feel that sorrow is out of place and tears become a blasphemy. How can he die? Who through his life and conduct and sacrifice, who through his love and courage and faith has taught the world the spirit matters, not the flesh. That the spirit has a power greater than the powers of the combined armies of the earth, combined armies of the ages. He who's small, frail, without money, without even the full complement of garment to cover his body, not owning even as much earth as might be held on the point of a needle. How was he so much stronger? The forces of violence, the might of empires, and the grandeur of embattled forces in the world. Why was it that this little man, this tiny man, this man with his child's body, this man so ascetic, living on the verge of starvation by choice, so as to be more in harmony with the lives of the poor, how was it that he exercised over the entire world of those who revered him and those who hated him such power as emperors could never wield? It was because he did not care for applause, he did not care for censure. He only cared for the path of righteousness. He cared only for the ideals which he preached and practiced. And in the midst of the most terrible disasters caused by violence and the greed of men, when the youth of the world was heaped up like dead leaves, dead flowers on battlefields, his faith never swerved in his own ideal of non-violence. He believed that though the whole world slaughter itself and the whole world's blood be shed, still his non-violence would be the authentic foundation of the new civilization of the world. And he believed that he who seeks his life shall lose it, and he who loses his life shall find it. But as I say, it would be the act of faithless deserters if we were to yield to despair, if we were indeed to believe that he is dead, if we were to believe that all is lost because he has gone. Of what avail would be our love and our faith? Of what avail would be our loyalty to him if we dared to believe that all is lost because his body is gone from our midst? Are we not there his heirs, his spiritual descendants, the legatee of his great ideals, the successors of his great work? Are we not there to implement that work, enhance it, enrich it, and make greater achievements by our joint effort than he could have made singly? Therefore I say the time is over for private sorrow. The time is over for the beating of breasts and the tearing of hair. The time is here and now when we stand up and say we take up the challenge of those who defied Mahatma Gandhi. We are his living symbols. We are his soldiers. We are his carriers of his banner before an embattled world. Our banner is truth. Our shield is non-violence. Our sword is a sword of the spirit that conquers without blood. Let the peoples of India rise up and wipe their tears. Rise up and still their sobs. Rise up and be full of hope and full of cheer. Let us borrow from him. Why borrow? He has handed it to us. The radiance of his own personality, the glory of his own courage, the magnificent epic of his character. Shall we not follow in the footsteps of our Master? Shall we not obey the mandates of our Father? Shall not we, his soldiers, carry his battle to triumph? Shall we not give to the world the completed message of Mahatma Gandhi? Though his voice will not speak again, have we not a million voices to bear his message to the world? And not only to this world of our contemporaries, but to the world generation after generation. Shall sacrifice be made? Shall his blood be shed for futile purposes of mourning? Or shall we not use that blood as a tilak on our foreheads, the emblem of his legion of peace-loving soldiers to save the world? Here and now, here and now, I, for one, before the world that listens to my quivering voice, pledge myself anew, as I pledged myself more than 30 years ago to the service of the undying Mahatma.
Subramanya Bharati, a major Tamil poet, was so inspired by the Bengali poem Vande Mataram, written by Bankim Chandra, that he translated this poem. The musical rendering you will hear is Subramanya Bharati's translation in Tamil of Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Mataram, Vande Mataram, Neerum, Nayam Padakani, Uripu, Nayam Padakani, Orum Poli, Pasutin, Vande Vangilagu, Varia, Vande, Vande, Mataram, Vande Mataram, Mataram, Vande Mataram, Nilavadanin, Silithidum, Nilavadanin, Silithidum, Tanirayam, Nirimalam, Tangiyam, Nirimalam, Tangiya, Tarukkalai Muriyum, மொழி பொலியும் வாய்ந்தனை மொழி பொலியும் வாய்ந்த வரங்களும் நல்குவையும் வரங்களும் நல்வாய்தரும்